Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Tarek moved swiftly through the dense underbrush, the soft pads of his feet barely making a sound as he glided over the forest floor. His bow, carved from the sacred wood of the Utrayamokri tree, was strung and ready, an arrow knocked loosely between his fingers. The soft hum of Pandora's forest surrounded him, alive with the whispers of creatures and the faint buzz of insects. He breathed in deeply, feeling the living energy of the land pulse through him, grounding him to the heartbeat of Ra. Behind him, his hunting party moved with practiced ease, each Navi a shadow in the vibrant green jungle, their bodies in perfect harmony with their environment. The group was hunting strombests today, and already they had found tracks, large and clear in the soft earth. Tarek crouched low, running his fingers over the indentations, his keen eyes scanning the ground for more signs. The herd was nearby. "Here," he whispered to the young hunter behind him, Karen, gesturing to the trail. "They passed not long ago. Be ready." Karen nodded eagerly, his eyes wide with anticipation. He was young, still full of the fire of youth, and though he was talented, his impulsiveness often got the better of him. Tarek had taken him under his wing, hoping to teach him patience and the wisdom that came with time. But today was no ordinary hunt. Something in the air felt off, and Tarek's instincts had been screaming ever since they set out. The hunters pressed forward, fanning out as they neared the clearing where they would find their prey. Tarek paused at the edge of the dense foliage, his hand raised to halt the others. Something moved ahead. It wasn't the heavy, lumbering steps of strombests. It was faster, erratic. A low growl rippled through the air, a sound Tarek had never heard before. His grip tightened on his bow, every muscle in his body tensing. He exchanged a quick glance with Aya, his mate, who stood a few paces behind him. Her eyes mirrored his concern. And then, from the shadows, it came. The creature burst from the undergrowth, its body a grotesque fusion of Navi and something else, something wrong. Its skin, mottled and slick with unnatural colors, gleamed in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. Long, twisted limbs flailed as it charged toward the hunting party, a guttural scream ripping from its throat. Tarek moved instantly, instincts kicking in as he drew and released his arrow in one smooth motion. The arrow struck true, embedding itself deep into the creature's chest, but the thing barely slowed. It barreled forward, knocking Kieran aside like a rag doll, its grotesque form twisting unnaturally as it closed in on Tarek. With a snarl, Tarek dodged to the side, drawing another arrow, but before he could fire, Aya leapt forward, her spear thrusting into the creature's neck. It let out a final, agonized howl before collapsing to the ground, twitching violently as life drained from its malformed body. For a moment, the forest was silent, the only sound the rapid breathing of the hunters. Tarek approached the creature cautiously, his heart still pounding in his chest. Up close, the horror of what he was seeing became clear. This was no animal of Pandora. This was something created, something born of a madness that had no place in their world. Aya knelt beside him, her eyes wide with disbelief. What is this, Tarek?" "I don't know," he muttered, his voice grim. He touched the creature's skin. It was cold, slick with an unnatural sheen. "But it's not of Pandora." Karen, shaken but unhurt, stumbled forward. "I've never seen anything like it." "These a broken bar. This isn't one of the sky people's avatars, is it?" Tarek shook his head. "Number. This is something else." As they studied the body, another figure stepped out from the Tresilio stone, the human scientist who had been living among the Navi for several cycles now. Her face was pale, her expression one of deep concern as she approached the fallen creature. "You found one," she whispered, her voice thick with dread. Tarek looked up sharply. "You know what this is?" Leah knelt beside the grotesque corpse, her hands trembling as she touched the distorted features. "I had heard rumors of broken bar, but I didn't want to believe it." "This is a mutation, a result of a failed experiment." "What kind of experiment?" Tarek demanded, his voice hardening. Leah's eyes flickered to him, guilt shadowing her features. It was a project designed to create stronger avatars. They were trying to enhance Navi DNA with genetic modifications, to make them more resilient, more powerful. But something went wrong, very wrong. Tarek's hands clenched into fists. This is the work of the Sky People? Leah nodded, her expression grim. Yes. Colonel Mason, the head of the project, pushed the scientists to go beyond the limits of what they could control. These creatures are the result. We must stop this, AI said, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. They're creating monsters. Tarek rose to his feet, his mind racing. This was not just a threat to his tribe, it was a threat to all of Pandora. If these creatures were allowed to roam free, they would destroy everything. The balance of the land would be shattered. We need to find the source of these creatures, Tarek said, his voice cold with determination. Leah, do you know where they're coming from? Leah hesitated for a moment before nodding. There's a lab, deep in the jungle. That's where the experiments are being conducted, but it's heavily guarded. You'll need more than just a small hunting party to get in. Tarek's jaw tightened. We'll gather the warriors. We must destroy that lab. The decision was made quickly. Tarek, AIA, Leah, and a group of Navi warriors set out toward the heart of the jungle, where the human lab was located. They moved swiftly, knowing that time was not on their side. The creatures were multiplying, spreading across Pandora, and with each passing moment, more lives were at risk. Karen, despite his earlier mistake, insisted on coming along. Tarek allowed it, though with a stern warning to follow orders. The young hunter's eagerness was both a strength and a danger. The journey was treacherous. The jungle, once a place of life and beauty, now felt tainted, corrupted by the presence of the mutants. They encountered several more of the creatures along the way, each one more twisted and dangerous than the last. The Navi fought valiantly, but it was clear that these monsters were unlike anything they had faced before. As they neared the human lab, Leah signaled for the group to stop. We're close, she whispered. There are sentries ahead. We need to be careful. Tarek nodded, motioning for the warriors to spread out. They moved silently through the trees, their bows and spears at the ready. The lab was a sprawling structure, hidden deep within the jungle, surrounded by fences and armed guards. Tarek's eyes narrowed. They would need to act fast. Leah pointed to a side entrance, barely visible through the thick foliage. That's our way in, she whispered. But we'll need to disable the security systems first. Tarek turned to Karen. You stay here, keep watch. If anything goes wrong, signal the others. Karen nodded, though his frustration was clear. He wanted to be in the thick of the fight, but Tarek knew better than to risk the young hunter's impulsiveness in such a delicate situation. With Leah leading the way, Tarek and the others crept toward the lab. The air was thick with tension, every step measured and precise. Tarek's breath was slow and steady as he moved through the shadows of the dense jungle, his body tense with anticipation. Leah led them toward the lab side entrance, and the flicker of human guards moving in and out of sight only heightened the urgency. This was no ordinary hunt. What they were doing could save Pandora or doom it. Leah motioned for them to halt, crouching low to the ground as she examined the entrance's security panel. This is going to take a few minutes, she whispered, her fingers already working on the wires, trying to bypass the system. Tarek kept his eyes on the guards, ready to signal the others if they were discovered. He could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken worry that they were walking into something much larger than any of them anticipated. The lab itself was a monstrous structure, a blemish on Pandora's landscape, hidden away in the deepest parts of the jungle. Aya crouched beside him, her spear gripped tightly in her hands. He could see the resolve in her eyes, the same fierce determination that had guided him since the day they met. Her hands, steady and skilled in healing, were just as deadly when defending their home. We need to move quickly, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Leah gave a soft grunt of frustration. This system is more complex than I expected. I can do it, but we have to be patient. Tarek glanced over his shoulder, where the other Navi warriors lay in wait. hidden among the trees. He trusted them. These were the best warriors of his tribe, and if anyone could pull this off, it was them. A sharp crack echoed through the air. Tarek's head snapped up just as Kieran came stumbling out from the underbrush, his face wild with panic. "They're coming!" he gasped, his voice a desperate whisper. I didn't see them in time." Behind him, the mutant creatures were emerging from the trees, grotesque and snarling, their twisted forms making guttural noises as they advanced. The human guards had turned as well, drawn by the sudden movement. Chaos erupted. Leah cursed under her breath, abandoning her work as the first of the mutants charged forward. Tarek reacted instantly, his bow in hand, drawing and loosing an arrow in a single fluid motion. The arrow struck the nearest creature square inches the chest, but like before, it barely slowed the monster's advance. "Kieran, get back!" Tarek shouted as the young Navi stumbled, trying to pull himself to his feet. The Navi warriors, responding to the commotion, erupted from the trees, arrows and spears flying toward the oncoming mutants. But these creatures were relentless, their mutated bodies absorbing blows that should have felled any natural beast. Tarek's mind raced. They were stronger, faster, and far more dangerous than any creature of Pandora. They had to destroy the lava, stop whatever was creating these abominations. Ai let out a fierce battle cry, launching herself at one of the mutants, her spear piercing through its grotesque form. The creature howled in pain but continued its charge, knocking her to the ground. Tarek was at her side in an instant, driving his own blade deep into the monster's neck. It let out one final screech before collapsing in a heap. Leah fired her weapon at the guards who had raised their guns, trying to control the situation, but the mutant attack was too sudden, too overwhelming. She darted back to the panel, her fingers flying as she tried to disable the security system in the middle of the chaos. "Just a few more seconds," she shouted. Another mutant creature leapt from the trees, and Kieran, despite his earlier panic, stood his ground, his spear ready. With a swift, calculated thrust, he struck the creature in the eye, driving it back. The beast snarled, but the blow had slowed it. Tarek nodded approvingly. The boy had potential, even if he was reckless. A shrill beep came from the panel, and Leah let out a breath of relief. "Got it." "The door's open, now let's move." Tarek barked an order to his warriors, signaling the retreat. They couldn't afford to lose more time. The remaining mutants, though vicious, would be dealt with later. Right now, they had to destroy the lab. They rushed through the side entrance, the door sliding shut behind them with a metallic hiss. The air inside the lab was sterile, the sharp smell of chemicals filling their nostrils. Leah led the way through the narrow corridors, her knowledge of the layout guiding them past locked doors and hidden labs. Tarek's heart pounded as they moved deeper into the belly of the beast. The sounds of battle outside faded into the distance, leaving only the cold, sterile silence of the lab. "This is it," Leah whispered as they reached the central lab chamber. The room was vast, filled with strange, humming machinery and tanks that held horrific, half-formed creatures suspended in glowing fluid. The mutants. Tarek's jaw tightened in disgust. This was the source of the abominations that were ravaging Pandora. And at the center of it all, standing with a smug expression, was Colonel Mason. "I knew you'd make it here eventually," Mason said, his voice dripping with arrogance. He stood calmly in the middle of the lab, his arms crossed over his chest. "I was hoping we'd get to have a little chat." "There is nothing to say," Tarek growled, stepping forward. His grip on his bow tightened. "This ends now." Mason's smile widened. "You think you can stop this? You think you can stop progress? These creatures are the future of warfare, the next step in evolution. The Navi. You're just relics, clinging to an outdated way of life. Pandora belongs to us now." Leah moved beside Tarek, her face set in grim determination. "You've gone too far, Mason." This is madness." Mason's expression darkened, and he reached for a control panel at his side. "Madness? No, Doctor. This is survival." humanity's survival. You've seen what these creatures can do. They're stronger, faster, more resilient than anything on Pandora. And with them under our control, we will dominate this moon and every other moon we set foot on. Before Mason could activate the controls, Tarek moved. His arrow flew through the air, striking the panel with a sharp crack, sending sparks flying. Mason cursed, backing away as Tarek and Leah advanced. AI and the other Na'vi warriors spread out through the room, searching for the critical systems that controlled the lab's experiments. They needed to destroy everything at the tanks, the machines, the data. Tarek knew they had no time to waste. You've already lost, Mason spat, his voice venomous. You think you can stop what we've created here? These creatures are just the beginning. But Tarek wasn't listening anymore. He moved swiftly, taking down the remaining security systems with precision. AI's spear smashed into the tanks, sending the fluid in the half-formed mutants spilling onto the floor. Leah frantically pulled out data drives, smashing them to prevent any of Mason's research from being saved. The lab was collapsing around them, and Tarek could feel the vibrations of explosions outside. The other Na'vi must have destroyed the generators, cutting off power to the entire facility. Mason, cornered and desperate, lunged toward the last remaining control panel. But before he could reach it, Tarek was there, his blade at the man's throat. "It's over," Tarek said, his voice low and deadly. Mason sneered. "You think this will stop me? You think you can win?" With one swift motion, Tarek struck. Mason crumpled to the floor, his body lifeless. Leah looked at the destruction around them, her face pale. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice urgent. "This whole place is going to blow." Tarek nodded. "Everyone, move." The Na'vi warriors gathered quickly, and together they raced through the crumbling corridors, the lab collapsing behind them. The explosions grew louder, shaking the ground as they sprinted toward the exit. As they burst through the doors and into the open jungle, the lab erupted in a massive explosion, sending debris and smoke billowing into the sky. The force of the blast knocked them off their feet, but when Tarek looked up, he saw the lab was gone and nothing but a smoldering ruin where the human facility had once stood. The battle was over. The remaining mutants that had attacked were either dead or fleeing into the wilds, and the Na'vi warriors stood victorious, though the cost had been great. Tarek gazed at the jungle, his heart heavy with the weight of what had been lost. But as he looked at his people at his side, Kieran standing tall, Leah standing among the Ama, he knew that they had saved Pandora from a far greater danger. For now, the balance was restored. But as Tarek stood there, looking out over the devastated land, he knew that this was only the beginning. The humans would return, and when they did, the Na'vi would be ready.